Good morning. This is the Fat Health Teacher, and I want to talk to you about the talk. That is the talk that, every parent is a little worried about, the awkward one, the one that even the kids cringe about. And the reason I want to talk with you about it is because your child is going to have sex at some point. And if you're not a parent, you know a child, and at some point that child is going to choose to have sex. Before I get into the things to discuss with your child, I wanted to talk to you about what the current trends are. Because the chances are 10%, if you have a middle school student, that they have already had some sort of sexual contact, and they jump to 40% once they get to high school. Now, the good news is that a majority of the students who are reporting sexual contact are also reporting that they have used condoms. It's not an awesome majority because the numbers are 57% in high school and I believe 1% in middle school. So the condom use is good. It could be better, but it's good. And my source for all of this information is the New Mexico Youth Resiliency Risk Survey. Or Risk Resiliency Survey. I would have to look that up again. You can get the information yourself if you're interested in looking at the stats by going to youthrisk.org. And it's actually pretty interesting, all of the things that they have collected data on. They administer this survey to every school that is willing to participate in the state of New Mexico, and then they aggregate the data, they break it out, they take a look at things that may be connected. For example, if a child is having sex, what else are they doing? In this situation, in Bernalillo County, 29% of students who are reporting having intercourse are reporting that they have also, or that they were using alcohol and or drugs at the time. And this is something that we need to talk to our kids about. There have been so many studies. You may or may not be aware that abstinence-only education was a really big deal. Like 10 years ago, they were talking about, we're just going to keep telling kids not to have sex. Don't have sex. Don't have sex. Don't have sex. And if we do this, then they're not going to have sex. And when we talk about birth control, if we talk about it at all, we are going to talk about all of the negatives of birth control. And we're not going to give them a full picture. In a way, this was a lot like the DARE program that is about keeping kids off of drugs. And the problem with that, and the problem with the abstinence-only education, is you're not giving students the information that they need in order to make an educated choice. When you choose to approach a topic like that, whether it be drug use or intercourse or sex, dating, any of those things, and you focus on the fear aspects, then your child is going to, A, not believe you because somebody is telling them that your information is wrong. And second, the second that they realize that the data is not there, for example, you might tell a kid, the first time you smoke pot, you're going to get addicted. And then they have friends that they've been talking to, and their friends are saying, hey, I've been smoking pot, and I'm totally not addicted. Or I did it once, like 3 years ago, and I've never done it again. As soon as they start getting that conflicting information, they're going to disregard everything that you have to say to them about these very, very important topics. So I encourage you to not avoid this conversation. And in fact, it would probably be good to have introductory levels of this conversation if your child is showing interest. It could be they see something on TV, or they want to know what that couple looks like, or maybe they see somebody making out in public. Whatever it is, this is your opportunity to talk to them. And the big thing I'm going to ask is please, please, please be a person that they can talk to about this, okay? Go into it without judgment. This is how I handle it with my kids. I have received some very interesting questions, and this tells me that kids are talking, but the talking that they're doing is often not based on reality. These are things that they've heard. I'll give you an example. One of my high school students reported that state that he had gone and had summer vacation in, that in this state, and I don't remember what it was. It was a Midwest state, but there was a rumor going around, and you can probably guess who was perpetuating it, that if a girl didn't have sex before she was 16, then she was destined to be fat for the rest of her life. Okay? This is false. This is bad information. And we need to make sure that our kids aren't falling for things like that. So I talked to you about the stats. Oh, another really, really important stat. New Mexico is first in teen pregnancies. First. I want that to sink in a little bit. This is a huge deal. Out of 1,000 students, our rate of pregnancy is 72. 72 of our kids are going to get pregnant as teenagers for every 1,000 that we have. This doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it is. The national average is 52. Okay? So we are at 150% of the national average. This is crazy. There is another study that was done. I want to say it was Chicago. I would have to look it up again. But what they did in this community is they made birth control free. They said, here's how you get it. It's free. You don't have to worry about being charged. They removed the stigma of going on it. This is something I try to do with my students. Just because you're on birth control doesn't mean that you're having sex. And the numbers went from double digits for teen pregnancy in that community. I believe they were in their 30s. It dropped to 2%. 2. This is huge. Let's talk about abortion real quick. Abortion is something that a lot of people are uncomfortable with. You can be totally against it for religious reasons. You can be uncomfortable with it because of personal beliefs that aren't necessarily a religious thing. Abortion is an ugly thing. Okay? Even if you believe that a person has the right to choose, it's not something that I would recommend anyone going through. It's a hard choice to make. It's a procedure that's going to stick with you for a long time. And I think that instead of focusing on whether or not abortions should even be available, why don't we focus on birth control? Okay? If we get our kids having safer sex, then we're going to reduce our pregnancy rates, and we're going to reduce our STD rates. And this is going to be the best way to attack the abortion issue. If we're reducing the number of unwanted pregnancies, then we don't have people who are saying, I can't have this baby, and are attempting to terminate the pregnancy. Whether they are going into a clinic, or if they're in an area where all the clinics have been shut down, or the waiting periods are too long, or there are other restrictions, going to a friend or going to a friend of a friend in order to take care of it. This is a terrifying idea. So, when I talk to my students about sex, what am I saying? First, we go over the parts. Okay? We go over all of the parts in the male system. We go over all of the parts in the female system. We talk about how they work. We talk about puberty. We talk about why they used to seem very rational and happy, and all of a sudden they seem like a crazy person. And their parents might be saying, what happened to you? You totally made sense, and now I can't even predict what's going to happen. Okay? We talk about how maybe they could get away with only taking a shower once a week or once every 2 weeks, but now every time they turn around, their parents telling them they stink. Okay? This is part of puberty. This is normal. All right? And above all else, kids want to know what's normal. Things like there is no standard size. Okay? Whether we're talking about breasts or we're talking about penises, there's no standard size. Everyone's a little bit different. Sometimes, even on the same person, things are a little different. This is okay. This is okay. This is normal. Everything's different. All right? I talk about when they should talk to a doctor. So monthly exams of both the testicles and the breasts, obviously something I'm going to promote because cancer of those areas can be incredibly significant. And if you're not doing monthly exams, you're not going to notice when something changes. I talk with the girls. I say, you know what? You may not have your period yet, because I teach a middle school, and I tell them it's okay. It's okay if you haven't had it yet. Don't panic. If you're 16 and you still haven't had it, now go talk to your doctor. Okay? Some of the girls worry because they're irregular. This is another thing. This is normal. You're going through puberty. Your body's figuring out how everything works. Okay? So More than anything, kids want to know that they're not freaks, and it's really easy for them to find things to be critical about. Now, after I have the puberty discussion with them, I am going to talk about my two rules for sex. So first, in the state of New Mexico, the age of consent for sexual activity, regardless of gender, the gender of the person initiating and the gender of the partner, is 13. Now, you can't just go and have sex with anyone at the age of 13. So if I'm 30 and I'm interested in a 13-year-old, A, something's wrong with me, and B, that 13-year-old is not considered able to give consent. This is important to realize. Giving consent at 13, so from the ages of 13 to 16, you can only give consent if the person's within 3 years of your age. Okay, so if I have a 13-year-old student and they're dating a 16-year-old, if that 16-year-old turns 17 before the 13-year-old turns 14, this is a problem. Okay, according to the law, they can get in trouble. Now, the other thing that I talk to them about is we don't have cameras everywhere. We're not spying on them. People break these rules. Okay, but if you choose to break them, there is risk, and you can get in trouble. And the type of trouble you're going to get in is something called statutory rape. And this is no joke. You can be listed as a sex offender, be on the registry, not get a lot of jobs that you might be interested in, not be allowed around children, all kinds of things. Okay, so there's risk. The other thing is that they need to know that if somebody has power over them, whether it's babysitter, coach, teacher, priest, whatever, if there is power, if there's a power differential, then that's also not okay. And it's typically not on the student to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay? It's going to be on the older person. So we talk about Mary Kay Letourneau. If you're not familiar with her story, you can Google her. Basically, middle school teacher who had a relationship with her 13-year-old student, had a couple of kids, and despite all odds, appears to be happily married and raising those kids with him after having spent years in jail. All right, so consent laws. Those are important. Next, I talk to my students about pregnancy prevention and STD prevention, and I always tell them abstinence. Abstinence is the only way you can be 100% sure that nothing's going to happen, that you're not going to get a disease, and that you're not going to get pregnant or get your partner pregnant. Okay, so we talk about this. If you are choosing to have intercourse, if you're female, I strongly recommend hormonal methods. The hormonal methods that I promote are Nexplanon, which is an arm implant, and also an IUD. They actually recently came out with, I'm talking in the last couple of years, with an IUD that is specifically sized for young people. And the reason I recommend these is because unlike the pill, the patch, the shot, and the ring, you're not having to remember constantly to do it. Okay, to refresh or renew or take another dose, any of those things. With the arm implant, 3 years. Okay, you don't have to think about birth control for 3 years. So kid gets it as an 8th grader, they don't have to think about birth control again until they're a junior in high school. This is fantastic. If they do an IUD, it can go even longer. I believe some of the IUDs go as long as 10 years. I think that the average is 5. You can go to the Planned Parenthood website. They have fantastic information on birth control. All right. I advise my students to avoid high-risk sex. High-risk sex means that drugs and alcohol are being used. It could mean that you have a lot of partners. It could mean that you're not using protection. If you're a dude, condoms all the time. If you are a female and you are partnering with somebody who is not male, then I recommend that you use other barrier methods. These are, if you have questions about them, you can drop me a line and I will talk to you about what the other options are. So the number 2 things that I push on my students is, well, I'm going to expand this to 3. 1, figure out what your boundaries are. All right. If you want to be abstinent until marriage, what does that mean? Does that mean you're not going to do anything below the waist? Does that mean nothing happens under your underwear? When it comes to kissing, is it just on the lips, on the cheek? Is it tongue? Like, what's going on? These are all things that the kids want to talk about. And even if it may be awkward, if you make yourself approachable, they will talk to you about these things. Okay? We know that educating students with accurate information, which means giving them both the pros and the cons of stuff, is going to help them make safer choices when they decide to have intercourse. Okay, so this is a really big deal. Now, I keep referring to intercourse, but understand that sex, as I define it in my classroom, involves a lot more than kind of your standard penis-vagina contact. Okay, so we talk about all of these things. There are a lot of things that are out there. A lot of kids have looked at things, so they've seen things, whether it be they go to a website and something pops up and it's, you know, sexual in nature, or they're talking to their friends, or I don't know, Skinamax is still a thing, but maybe they're watching that, or maybe they're actually just watching porn and they find somebody's porn collection. There's lots of stuff out there. I tell them if they can imagine it, somebody on the internet is doing it and has made it sexual in some way. Okay, so the first, as I said, rule is to know what your boundaries are. Communicate those boundaries to your partner. Okay. Second, everyone has to consent. Okay. So whatever it is that you want to do with your partner, if somebody's not consenting to a specific thing, then you're not going to do that thing. Okay. So if your partner says, I do not want to do, and then XYZ, whatever it is, then it is not your job to try to persuade them to change their mind. It is your job to say, okay. All right. And I'm emphasizing this with students. Consent is huge. All right. And I remind them, if somebody is under the influence of drugs or alcohol or both, then whether or not they're able to give consent is kind of up in the air. And better safe than sorry. Just don't do anything. If this is a person that is worth having sex with, then you can wait. All right. And then my last rule. Okay, so consent. So let's review. Number 1, understand your boundaries, share them with your partner. Number 2, everyone who's participating, whether it be just you, your partner, multiple partners, whatever, and regardless of whatever activities it is that you're doing, needs to consent. And if there is no consent, the activity needs to stop. The final rule that I give to my students is that they need to take personal responsibility for preventing pregnancy and STDs. Okay? So that means that if I am a guy and I'm having sex with a girl and the girl tells me, oh, don't worry about it, you can totally go bareback. Bareback means no condom, for those of you who are uninitiated. Because I'm on the pill, or I'm on the patch, or I'm on, and there are lots of options out there, okay? If I'm the dude, I'm going to say, I'm still using a condom. And it's not that I don't believe you, it's that I am taking personal responsibility for preventing pregnancy and preventing STDs. Okay? And using the pill and using a condom is actually a good thing because it's going to increase the chance that pregnancy is not going to occur. Okay? If I'm a female, I am absolutely going to make my partner, if they are a male, wear a condom. Okay? We're not going to do any of this, let me see how it feels without. We're not going to make excuses. We're not going to say, oh, I forgot. In fact, I will have my own condoms. And if I'm embarrassed by the idea of having condoms, I can go to a truck stop, go into the bathroom, they have a little machine, I can buy some condoms. Okay? I can go to a public health office, or I can go to Planned Parenthood, I can ask for condoms. If I am at a school that has a school-based health center, depending on where you are, what level you are, I can go in, I can ask for condoms. It's not going to be a big deal. And I think that the biggest thing that we can do for our children is to normalize the use of condoms and to make it okay to talk about these things and to not make it a dirty thing. Because if it's dirty, then it's in the closet. We're not talking about it. And I think if we want our numbers to come down, if we want our teen pregnancy rates to decrease, if we want our STD rates to decrease, we need to bring things out of the dark. We need to talk about them. We need to let kids know that yes, there's stuff out there and it's okay to talk about, and it's okay. That it's okay and that they're going to be okay. All right, so I know that the idea of, thinking about your child or children that you know having sex eventually is scary, but it doesn't have to be. This is the Fat Health Teacher signing out. If you are enjoying what you're hearing, if you have any messages, comments, complaints, whatever it is, please let me know. Please subscribe and share. Thank you very much, and have a good day.